Welcome to this episode of Stanford Medicine X Live for Tuesday, May 20th, 2014. This program is a weekly live recorded broadcast and tweet chat from the organizers of Stanford Medicine X, a conference that explores the intersection of emerging technology and medicine. The views and opinions expressed on this broadcast are those of the individual participants and not necessarily those of the Stanford University School of Medicine or the conference organizers. If you are joining us for the first time, a quick reminder that there is a simultaneous conversation happening on Twitter right now using the hashtag MedX. Alicia Staley, also known as Stales, is moderating the Twitter discussion on the MedX hashtag this evening. So please make sure to start up your Twitter client to join in the online conversation and interact with today's speakers. Please also make sure to like our YouTube page at www.youtube.com/Stanford Medicine X. We also wish to remind you that registration for Medicine X 2014 is now open. Don't miss the year's premier patient-centered conference on emerging technology and medicine. Unique opportunities, such as our masterclass program and our IDEO Design Challenge workshop, have extremely limited space availability. You'll want to take advantage of these programs while our regular registration pricing is still available until August 1st, 2014. Please note, you are watching a live online program and there is a delay between real-time events and the live stream you are watching. Tweets from our in-studio guests will appear before you see the real-time events they are tweeting about unfold on the video live stream. The topic of today's program for May 20th, 2014 is Women Entrepreneurs in Healthcare, Stories, Challenges, and the Future. With us today is a diverse panel of women with insights into entrepreneurship. The goal of this program is to hear from them, have them share with us their views on these issues, and of course, to answer your questions out there from our viewing audience on Twitter.
Hi everyone, welcome, good afternoon or good evening wherever you are. Welcome again to this episode of Medicine X Live, our special panel session on entrepreneurship, and today we have a especially exciting panel for you guys. We apologize ahead of time that Amy could not make it, but today we still have two superb people with very vast experience on both the entrepreneurship level as well as the provider level as well as the patient level. And we're going to have an enriching conversation. I would like to remind everyone that what makes this conversation rich is the Twitter questions that we get. So I'd like to remind everyone to send those questions as they come up. So let me introduce our guests and then we'll dive into our conversation. First we have Julie Silver, who is an associate professor at Harvard Medical School and founder of Oncology Rehab Partners that develops the STAR program certification for hospitals and cancer centers. The STAR program is an evidence-based cancer rehabilitation service that improves hospital revenue and patient outcomes. Elise Singer, who is an MD, MBA, is the head of the medical affairs at Sonatus Medical, maker of SoundBite, the innovative, non-invasive solution to single-sided deafness. Elise is also co-founder of Doximity, most recently Share the Visit. Dr. Singer practices family medicine at UCSF. All right, Elise and Julie, I'd like to welcome you. I'd like to start first off with Julie. So why don't you go ahead and tell us your story and how you got into entrepreneurship and why you felt that that was the path for you.
Well, thank you so much. It's nice to be here, and I sort of fell into it, I guess. Really, what happened was that I've always been innovative and interested in lots of ideas. I started my career early on publishing books and doing a lot of very creative things, but what happened was I was in my 30s and I had just had my third child and I was a practicing physician and I was diagnosed with cancer. And I went through treatment and I got really, really, really sick. And when I was finished with treatment, my doctors, who were fantastic, said to me, go home and try to heal yourself. And if you're able to ever go back to work, that would be great. And I realized that that was pretty devastating. I'm a rehab doctor. I'm a physiatrist by training. And so to hear doctors basically tell me that I had to go home and figure out on my own how to heal myself when just about everyone else in the in the United States gets help with this. If you had a stroke, you get help. If you've been in a car accident, you get help. If you've had a sports injury, you get help with your rehab. Really was quite devastating personally and also eye-opening professionally. So I did work on healing myself, and then I started talking about this and realized that there's a lot of people in this situation, and that we had a real gap in care in the healthcare system. And that's when I developed the STAR program for hospitals and cancer centers to help alleviate that gap in care.
Oh, sorry, I muted myself. Elise, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into entrepreneurship and what you've been doing the last few years?
Sure. Thanks for having me also. Well, I didn't intend to get into entrepreneurship, really. I went to medical school and was practicing medicine, and I was kind of the black sheep of the family by becoming a professional, because my parents are both entrepreneurs, and my brother was an entrepreneur, and my cousin's an entrepreneur, and everyone was doing that. And I grew up with it really at a time when it wasn't nearly as popular as it is now. Dinner time conversations all about the business and all, and I just chose a different path. But I will say that along the way, especially during residency and then while I was practicing, I did realize I was different. When things didn't work, I spent a lot of time figuring out how I would fix them, and I wound up I think getting myself, it's fair to say, into a situation where I was able to run a practice even though I was an employee, and very quickly took on some of the newest practice management trends, which now, of course, are obvious type things, but I really was playing. And then I got involved in an electronic health record project, which was, I think, pretty instrumental, because that was my first real touch with the business world, and it dawned on me that first of all, I really enjoyed, it was epic, I really enjoyed working on the business side, and so that was very exciting, but there was just this huge gap that was obvious. This was back when Epic was installing in Kaiser, and really the beginning for Obama, and everything really started the wave. And it dawned on me that in my career this was going to be a really big deal. And some changes where I was working led to a kind of last-minute decision to go to business school. And I only applied to 2 schools. I got into a great school. It was kind of hard to say no. And literally within my first 4 months I was at Haas, I wound up involved in my first startup and really couldn't look back from there. It just is one of those things where it turns out it is me. I just didn't recognize it early, and it's a path that, yeah, I've been involved. That first one never really got off the ground. Then I was involved with Doximity for some years, and then did some other better paid work in between. Started Share the Visit. We didn't really make it either, so not enough. So shut it down recently. Now I'm working in a Series C startup, which is a fantastic group of people, and kind of got there sideways, but it's one of those things where once you're there, for better or worse, if it fits, it's hard to stop.
All right, so I have a quick question to you guys that we'll go to before we go to break at 5:50. Well, my question is I heard both of you guys sort of talk about seeing a problem and wanting to solve it. And so my question to you is, why entrepreneurship as an outlet rather than via traditional programs or through the clinic or through research? What makes entrepreneurship, why choose that route versus the sort of traditional route that we have in medicine to go about with innovating?
Well, I guess I can start with that. I fell into it. I didn't go to business school. And I really fell into it because I wanted to change that the traditional academic route of getting grants and so on wasn't going to accomplish what I needed to accomplish. And so I became a social entrepreneur because it was really mission oriented. It wasn't because I said, gee, I'd really like to make a lot of money, or I really want to be super innovative, or anything like that. The reason I became a social entrepreneur was because there was this big gap in care, and I realized that I knew how to solve it, and I wanted to make that happen. So that's that. I'm not sure if that really answers your question, and I think that some of the people that are watching this are probably going to be a little bit more thoughtful about the steps that they take in their plan and their strategy and so on. And I love that. I mean, I think it's great that you're doing this because you're giving people some insights that I never really had. I didn't understand what was possible or how to do this and so on. I just knew that somehow I had to do it.
Well, it sounds like that's what matters, is that when you have to do something, you do it. Elise, do you want to comment on that?
Sure. So it's a good question. It's one of those things where it's just, I don't know, you're just driven to it. If there's a problem and you can fix it, you know what to do and you believe you can do it, then it's really hard not to do it, is really my only answer. I mean, it's not the easiest path. I think that it would be easier not to have to use the word have to pursue it, but I mean, it's just something that, I'm happy when I'm doing it, and the ability to make change is just really important, and I guess part of what makes me happy. With Doximity, obviously it was a fantastic team, and I had just moved. I was in business school, and I was practicing in a place where I didn't know a bunch of the docs, and I had a guy come in with an eye socket fracture, and I didn't have my normal network, and I wound up calling the local ER and chatting with the doc to then find the right guy who was going to help me. And it was the time during mobile. I was in the exam room with my iPhone and all, and that was very new and exciting, and how do we use that? And that's really where that was born from, and it was something that was important. It was around patient care, and it was fun and a great team. And Share the Visit was founded from my dad, who's sick, and to help bring care coordination, definite problem, some paying customers, but not enough, maybe ahead of the market, or maybe it's going to exist, but not as a standalone business. But at the end of the day, the recurring theme is there's something really important that needs to be done, and something about it. I mean, it's obvious to you what a solution could be, and then you need to learn to get to the right solution, of course, but it's just compelling.
All right. Well, I think we'll go ahead and go to break with that point, and we'll be back after 2 minutes.
Let's take a quick break to remind those of you just joining us for this episode of Stanford Medicine X Live that we are here with a panel of leaders in healthcare and business discussing the topic Women Entrepreneurs in Healthcare, Stories, Challenges, and the Future. This program is made possible by the Stanford University School of Medicine, Department of Anesthesia, Stanford AIM Lab, Stanford Hospital and Clinics, and the Agency for Healthcare Research Quality. Time to take a shout out to Twitter. If you are following this conversation online or on Twitter, Alicia Staley, also known as Stales, is moderating the Twitter discussion on the MedX hashtag this evening. We have with us today a panel of women entrepreneurs and leaders in healthcare. E-patients and caregivers out there, what questions do you have for our panelists today? Which women leaders in healthcare and technology are you following right now? Healthcare providers, technologists, and researchers out there, what are the unique talents and opportunities that you see women bringing to creating change in the healthcare industry? Tweet us your questions or responses, and we'll do our best to have the panel address them during this episode of Stanford Medicine X Live for Tuesday, May 20th, 2014.
Welcome back. I'd like to first make a Twitter call to Rachel, Wilma, Anit, and Cheryl for following along and engaging online. Looking forward to continuing to field your questions. I guess I'm going to switch topics a little bit. We just heard about the fact that both of you guys are really driven by problem solvings and really sort of have turned to entrepreneurship as a way to really be able to solve those problems in a more free environment than the current setting. Moving on, I guess, recently the story at GitHub sort of highlighted some of the challenges that women are facing at startups. And I'd like to sort of turn it to you guys to see what are the challenges that you guys have seen in your experience that have been sort of unique to women in trying to get a startup going in the healthcare field. And we'll go ahead and start with Elise.
There hasn't really been anything overt that I can put my finger on being female. Of course, it's hard to tell, right? I mean, something were going on, unless it's overt, it is tough to know. I mean, the stats are not in women's favor. I do question around fundraising. Julie, I don't know if you did fundraise or not, but the typical persona who raises money is a very male persona. If you were just to back gender out of it, the person who exudes confidence, who knows they'll do no wrong, who that solar founder, go get 'em kind of persona, is just, if you were to draw broad strokes, is different from female characteristics, many of which I have. I'm a communicator. If I have doubts about something, I don't have any trouble speaking about them. I see that as calculated risk-taking and getting things solved and working in teams and all. But that could be perceived as lack of confidence or whatever. I mean, I haven't particularly been accused of that before, but you do have to wonder if some of that comes to play in certain scenarios. But I can't say that there's been anything really overt, except every once in a while looking around and being like, hey, I'm the only woman here. But, I don't really think of myself in the context of, oh, I'm a woman. And so then, I don't see myself and therefore think, oh, I'm looking at myself, I'm out of context. I'm just looking at the world, they're looking at me. Maybe other people have noticed more than me.
Julie, do you have anything to add?
Well, I think what I would add is that I've never had a female boss. I've never had a female mentor. There was nobody to look forward to or up to that was ahead of me. And I think that for women, that is important, to have someone who's sort of ahead of them and can say, I've done these things. I've had children. I've started a company. I've been in an academic department and been promoted. I've done, these different things, and I never had that. And so one of the things that I really try to do is reach back to women that are behind me and help pull them up. And I mentor probably far too many women in terms of my time and so on, and I wish I could even spend more time mentoring younger women or women who are in a little bit different situation than I'm in. But I do think it's one way that we can give back and really support women, because it's something that I definitely felt all along the way, that I wish that there was somebody that I could look at. How did you do this, and ask questions and so on.
Well, Julie, I think you hit the question, you hit the topic that's coming up from Twitter. Jessica Shaw is actually asking, where do you find mentorship as a woman in healthcare entrepreneurship? Elise, do you want to add your comments to that?
Yeah, I would. It's funny, and one of my co-founders in one of my startups and I had a running debate about this, whether women mentor women the way men mentor men, and we've had really different experiences, so I'm sure they're both right. But my experience, I mean, where I stand on this, I've had several really strong women mentors along the way. As a matter of fact, each of my steps through education and various places where I've worked and all, I've had amazing women, all of which actually I think I'm still in touch with, even from long, long ago. I've also had really strong men mentors. I do think the topics have been different sometimes, probably driven more by me. I remember when I was my first job outside of residency, I just chose this woman and basically like made her mentor. We were working together on this project, and I kept asking for more time and coming to her with questions. One of my first questions was about kind of dress code for executives in hospital systems, which I guess sounds kind of ridiculous, except that it wasn't to me, and I wanted to dress the part, and I didn't know how to get there, and I really appreciated how she presented herself, and we're still in touch to this day. And there are networks of women mentors and women executives, and it's really powerful. I've had a very positive experience, and I haven't had women hold me back or hold me down. I really haven't. Of course, this co-founder of mine had different experiences, so that's not to say that that doesn't happen. I may be lucky or not paying attention if someone is trying to hold me back. I mean, of course, it can all be interpreted, but I really think it's out there, and I think that if you are a woman looking for a mentor, women are really happy to mentor. Many women, I guess, are really happy to mentor other women, and maybe you should be asking, and you might be surprised at how willing women really are to help.
All right, I'd like to give a Twitter shout out to Marie O'Connor and Jessica and Cheryl who are joining us. So moving along, with regards to mentorship and the environment. So it's true that you mentioned earlier, Elise, about financing, and that it just happens that actually a study in 2010 showed that 10% of Series A financing goes to startups led or founded by women. And additionally, women with successful companies tend to be able to lend at 15 to 20% less amount of money than companies led by men. So on the financing front, how do you guys see that improving in the future? Is it just an issue about having more women in the banking, investment, and VC world? Or is that just about changing the landscape of who is an entrepreneur? Julie, we'll start with you and then move to...
Well, like a lot of things, I think it's probably multifactorial. I think that that educating women about entrepreneurship and about all kinds of different things. I started out with a publishing course at Harvard Medical School, and I would and I still have that. It's really turned into a healthcare leadership course, but one of the things about that course is that it is really about communication and really about getting your ideas out there and so on. And what I realized was that a book proposal is very similar to a venture capital proposal. There's a formula, and you need to know the formula. And it really works to understand the elements of the formula that are important and the kinds of information that you need in this. So both of them actually tell a story, and the story has to be compelling, and it has to be supported, and so on. So I think that a part of this barrier to entrepreneurship and barrier to funding is really to make sure that women have the tools and the education needed. And I know for me that I didn't have formal training in that, so I was an autodidact. I had to teach myself all of these different things, and that it works. But offering people things like you're doing today and so on, they're really helpful to give people the right information.
Elise, do you want to take a stab at this one?
I will. I'm not sure I have the greatest answer. I'm not sure I'm very optimistic about that. I mean, I think things will even out, but if you look at even the wage discrepancies and all, there are differences, and I actually believe there probably is a different playing field because the numbers are pretty dramatic. So, you need to, I mean, how many women are asking versus men? 10% of women are getting financed, but of course, it may not be 50-50 that are asking, so that may be part of it. But venture capital in particular has been a very male-dominated field for a long time, and even today, I know a lot of VCs, I know a lot about them, and it's a very small number of women partners out there, and I'm not in VC, but I know them, and they know a lot of them, I think, know me, or I've met with them. I don't know if they would all remember me, but some of them I know well. It's just, and then there are so many men, and at the end of the day, we have natural biases. So I think that's part of it. Although I don't think that if the world were filled with women VCs, that would necessarily solve everything. A comment. I actually think that the most gender-specific kind of put-down ever that I had across from a VC was from a woman VC. uh, direct feedback maybe, or maybe not. I don't know. It's just hard to tell. I mean, biases can come from someone who is that gender or who is that race or whatever. They can be taught to us. That's been well studied. So, more women asking, more women believing they can do it, more an expansion. So I agree with Julie. It is a formula, but having different ways that it's acceptable to communicate that formula, I think that's part of it. Having more women VCs be part of the conversation. And, I would also say VC funding is very, very specific for a certain type of startup that you want to run. And we bootstrapped Share the Visit very consciously. I don't know if it was the right decision. It's not here anymore. But, I also wondered many times if, as a woman, I was looking to bootstrap or not go VC, because the idea of VC, that you scale this thing incredibly rapidly, that you get this massive return within a certain window, you jettison off the cliff as opposed to moseying towards it, I don't know, at that point, first of all, with the idea, it didn't seem to sit correctly with me. But it also wasn't the business model that I was most comfortable with at that point, so that you could also question, well, specifically around the question VC, are women looking less for that type of ramp up? So I don't know that I have any great actual solutions, but that's how I see the problem.
Thank you. So I'm going to do a Twitter shout out to Vanessa, joining us all the way from South Africa. And then we also have a question from DM, and he says, how do you find the confidence to move your ideas forward? And Elise, why don't we start with you, and then Julie, if you have anything to add.
Well, it's a good question. I look at entrepreneurship as a calculated risk, and if you believe in your calculations, so to speak, then that's what gives you confidence. And can you do it? How you approach it. If you believe in the idea and you can communicate it, for Julie's point, then you could also look to bankroll it in some way that you don't need a ton of confidence, in the sense that, I mean, you always need confidence to move forward with it, but you'll have some sort of salary to live on, something small, and a certain time frame to prove things out that you understand. Again, all of those things give you confidence moving forward in what you're doing. But at the end of the day, I think the most important part is you need to believe in the idea. I mean, there's a problem that you see, and it's an important problem worth solving, and you have a pretty good idea of how to solve it. There are a lot of things you need to kind of swat away, and you need, yes, there's a problem, okay, is it the right answer? You have to have your eyes open to what, there can be side problems that you're actually chasing, and etc. And asking the right questions, making sure you've done your homework, that you really know there's a problem, not just you think you're a problem, that it's a problem. But if you really have spoken with people, you know, to Steve Blank, you've done your customer development, and there are people who have a need who are going to pay, then it's a calculated risk, you know, do it. So what? You lose your salary for a year or two and then you fail. Well, I failed. I'm here to talk about it. It didn't kill me. You know, I mean, like, just think about it that way, and then that gives you the confidence. You know, you're gonna do it. You're gonna try your hardest, and you know there's a problem. So hopefully you're gonna be the one to solve it.
Julie, do you have anything to add?
I would say that there's
I think we're losing you there with the connection a little bit.
very simplistic, but I sort of break it up into groups of maybe.
All right, so I'm gonna move it along. We'll hopefully get Julie back here in a second. But I want to ask Elise this question. So, you know, just looking at a few stats before coming on to do this panel, you know, it is noticeable that, you know, in med school enrollment, and actually really enrollment across all healthcare industries, the enrollment rate has pretty much reached 50-50 in terms of men to women ratio. You know, but looking at other, in the tech industry as well as in the business industry, really enrollment there is anywhere between 23 to really 40% at best in terms of you know, female enrollment to male. Do you find that that's playing out a role in the startup community in general in terms of healthcare versus non-healthcare startups? And you know, how do you see that shaping out?
Yeah, I've really noticed that, I have to say. So coming from the tech side, coming from the healthcare side, getting the tech in place, I think, is always a challenge, and I think that's actually unrelated to gender, at least from what I've seen. Just getting those, you know, it's like our Venn diagrams of people we know and hang out with don't even cross. So until you find that one person to let you into that other network, that's kind of an ongoing challenge that I think a lot of healthcare people have. So once I made, okay, so this is actually an interesting story. So I have 3 children. I have 3 girls, as a matter of fact. I care a lot about this whole gender thing. And so my youngest was in daycare, and we live in Palo Alto, which is like the mecca of tech and all of this. And it dawned on, well, I was trying to find tech for Share the Visit, and I was just basically telling everyone I knew about my idea, and did they know anyone who wanted to be my tech co-founder, etc. And I randomly spoke with one of the moms at the daycare for my 3rd child, and she was like, oh, okay, she didn't really say anything. And 2 months later or something, she approached me and she's like, so tell me more about this startup thing that you had told me about. And I was like, sure, you know, anyone who said that to me, of course, I was ready. So we met like that night. She came over and I pitched the idea. I didn't even know what she did. So it turns out she became my tech co-founder, and she's one of, you know, she's very, finding a woman in tech, especially as a co-founder, is almost unheard of. I mean, so much so that when we were speaking with people or customers, or, you know, people are looking around, they're like, it's the 2 of you, like, you know. It was an odd thing, and it may again be by virtue of the fact that I was asking at daycare, right? And so who was picking up their child, that we found each other. Maybe it's not that odd, but everyone that she brought in to do work for us, and since she's moved on and all, I mean, we're still very friendly and in touch and all, since we shut down Share the Visit. Everybody, with maybe one exception, is male. All of the high quality people that she knows and that's in her network that do it's, so it is a big phenomenon. And you know, it comes down to science and math and technology. What is it, STEMI, whatever it's called, the engineering, girls need to be, it's like girls can code, I think is great. Girls need to know that they can do sciences and be strong in that and apply it now to tech. I mean, we're there in medicine. I don't think that hardcore pathophysiology and all the stuff that we learn to get in is so much harder than coding or math or engineering or whatever. It's just a matter of wanting to do it, knowing you can do it, having the confidence.
All right, thank you. Julie, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, I want to go back to that comment about how do you have the confidence to go forward, because I think that a really important thing is to just think about the difference between having a great idea and being able to implement that idea. And it's the implementation that people get hung up on. So a lot of people have these great ideas, and then they're just really stuck. And I think that one of the first things to really consider is, what is your strategy, and can you do a protocol or a prototype or a pilot or something to get you some results that give you the confidence to kind of do the next thing. And that I just think that that's really a big part of where people get hung up.
I agree that the most important thing is to sort of get out there and test what you're doing and see if it gains traction at some point. Going back to the notion of this disparity between sort of gender enrollment at sort of tech and business schools versus medicine, do you guys find that medicine is an easier place to navigate from that perspective, or in a sense, some of the disparities that exist sort of still cross both lines? I'm muting myself again. I'm so sorry. Julie, we'll start with you.
Well, there's clearly disparities. And one of the things that we've really looked at a lot at Harvard are these things called microaggressions. And as we talk here and we sort of think about the types of experiences that we've had, I think that the very overt bias or prejudice or whatever, those are easy to spot, but the smaller, more subtle microaggressions, or the more subtle, discriminatory types of things that happen, they're harder. And they're harder to talk about, they're harder to spot, they're harder to describe. But when you see these big differences, you really see that that they probably exist. And I know that one of my daughters came home and recently told me, Mom, this is a science class she's in. Mom, I'm convinced that this teacher really thinks that the boys are smarter than the girls. And it starts young when you sort of get this sense that maybe it's a little bit harder to compete for different reasons. Which isn't to say that we haven't competed, because we went to medical school and so on, and it didn't necessarily hold us back, but clearly there's big differences in numbers, and there are reasons for that are important and must have something to do with some of these biases and the ability of women to effectively compete.
So I'll weigh in also. It does start surprisingly early. So again, I'll bring up my girls. I have my now 10-year-old, but I think I had this conversation last year when she was 9, was around, and by the way, she just likes math and science, and she said therefore, of course, she's good, good at it, right? Like it's all what you like, and therefore what you practice, or at least that's what I believe. And yet she's noticed that. I mean, she just sees it as arrogance, which actually I'm happy that that's her viewpoint at the moment, but that the boys are all convinced that they're better than the girls at these subjects. And you know, that's part of it. I don't know where that comes from. I'm not the right person, I guess, to even ask, and people probably have a PhD background in this that could talk about it. But it is interesting to me that at such a young age there is something different, whether it's societal or somewhat inborn, or they're getting it at home through these, you know, subtle discussions, looks, actions. You know, I don't know what it is, that it really does start so early. But, you know, education, I think this can all be countered, and we just owe it to the women and the girls and the boys in our lives to just make sure that we're conscious about that and to talk about it. You know, for business school in particular, I do think that there's a systemic problem, basically, because if you do the math, by the time you're going to business school, most women, and men for that matter, but it's not necessarily an issue for men, are starting to think about getting married, maybe in the next 5 years having children. If you've been out for 3 years to 5 years after college, and that's an issue. You know, the women who are at business school with me were were thinking about that a lot, and a lot more actively, I felt like, than the men who, well, the women in terms of action items, like have to find spouse, whereas men, I think, were happy to be dating, and that's all good. It was on their mind too, but it didn't feel like pressure. And so I think that that's an issue with business school in particular. With medical school, you can go straight out of college and you get that all under your belt, and then right after residency or during residency, you're finding someone, and then whenever, and you have children and you're set, you can work part-time. So that's easier. And the other big systemic difference that I have seen and heard a lot of discussion about between the MD track and the MBA track, as someone who's been in both, is that I can tell you every woman, literally, I think, that I went to medical school with, who has a really well-paying career and a not horribly stressful life, who either chooses to work full-time, or she works 3/4 time or 1/4 time or 1 day a week, and can really make that work. Most women didn't go into neurosurgery, right? Like, there's some diversion there. I don't know the stats gender-wise, but I bet they adhere to how much you can control your fate in terms of your life afterwards. But in business school, it's like, you know, women, there just aren't many career paths to the top that let you work half-time during the childbearing years. And for women in healthcare, you can very well be doing that and then moving into administration or running a department or whatever. It's not, doesn't seem to be as big a detractor in reality or culture-wise. And that may be the chicken and egg because there are so many women in healthcare now, but I think the profession also just lends itself to it. As someone who practices a day a week now, and then I've managed to, you know, it's good in the situation I'm in that I'm working 4 days a week on the business side. You know, I think it was part and parcel because of my experience and level that I was able to arrange this for myself. It's not the norm. And so that's a big barrier too, is that career-wise, it's gonna be all or nothing, or more so on the business side than the healthcare side. And I think that women think about that really early on and make choices around that.
Yeah, so I think that was, I mean, you guys pointed out some key differences and the subvert inequalities there. My question is back to, you know, you said something about controlling your own destiny, and I think both of you guys alluded to in the past about how entrepreneurship is a way for you guys to go out and solve problems that are harder or take much longer to solve within the traditional elements. But my question to you is, what else, what are the other benefits of entrepreneurship there in terms of being able to potentially take control of that situation, or potentially become a leader in a field where there are so many inequalities? And what advice would you give to the women leaders out there that are pursuing that track in regards to that? Elise, do you want to start, and then we'll go to Julie?
So this, I think, is actually the most popular topic that people come to me for advice. You know, how is it that you have such a robust career and have children and you're happy during the day, because it is a balancing act. for men too. I mean, this is not just a female topic at all, especially as men's, really do a lot more in the house. I think it has become much more of a generalized question, although the burden still is mostly, I think, on women in reality. My one-liner now around this, and what I really believe is the answer, is understanding what you really want. That's what it all stems from. What is your ideal working hours, profession, career? Are you in leadership? Like, that's really, really important to you. You are the CEO, or that's not what's most important to you. How many hours do you want to be either just not working, or with your spouse, or with your children? And understanding what you really want, and then not compromising and getting it until you get there. And that is, to me, that is the crux of the matter. Because a lot of women, I think, are just unclear. It's not, now I'm not saying it's easy to figure out what you want. I think that's actually surprisingly hard, at least in my experience. Maybe other people are just more clear, but I don't think so. I think we want to clone ourselves. I think we want to be home 3/4 time, and we want to work 1.5 times, or I'll speak for myself, like I'm a type A person. I love residency. It's a little crazy, but I love being totally immersed in what I do and living and breathing it. But I also really love, and at the end of the day, of course, like most of us, prioritize, my family and my life outside of work, and want to be there a lot of the time. I'm not somebody who wants to be home full time. I just don't. But there aren't, 2.25 of me, right? There's one. And I have to sleep well so that I'm happy. And so understanding how to divide that and what really makes me happy, and then reminding myself of that in moments where I'm saying no in one direction or the other, and what are the right compromises, is what it all comes down to. And then if you have those constraints and you believe in them, then you can really craft around that, and you can say no to opportunities that are really cool in one direction or the other, but don't get you to where you really want to be. Because those opportunities eventually do come, and especially if you work really hard towards them and you know what they are. So that's the advice for anyone. It's funny because implicit in your question is that there's a problem with being a family and a woman leader, and I don't know, why ask that question? Where is the problem? Well, what's implied is that there's this whole tug of war, and so that's my answer: is look it in the eye and just decide. There aren't two of you, there are one of you. How do you want to divide that, and then make that happen?
Oh, thank you. The advice to understand what you really want, and then not to compromise about that while figuring out the other compromises, is key advice. And we often see a lot of entrepreneurs who haven't figured that piece out. And once you do, you're able to focus a lot better. Julie, do you want to add to that before we go to this last question from Twitter?
Well, I think Elise said it really well, which is that you sort of want to clone yourself, and you want one person to stay home and raise your kids, and another person to travel and see the world, and to go to work every day and work really hard and get ahead. And there really aren't all those different people within you. So you do have to make compromises. And for many of us who come to medicine and are entrepreneurs and so on, we are very, whether it's ambitious or type A or whatever you want to say, but we like to do a lot of things, and we're not happy with sort of having to be held back from any of those things, and that doesn't feel real comfortable. So I don't think there's an easy answer for that. I always laugh because there's one of my friends, and we sit down every 6 months and we'll say, oh, okay, now I have the perfect schedule. I figured it out. And 6 months later, we're like, oh, I'm so miserable. My schedule's not working. And then we change it again. And we just keep doing this cycle. And we laugh at each other because it's ridiculous. We're never going to have the perfect schedule.
All right, so I'm going to take it to the last question, which I think is actually from Twitter here, which is a very Medicine X question. But how much does passion and dedication, or that experience, or experiencing a certain problem firsthand, um, for your startup guide your sort of path. So in essence, how much passion and dedication, what role do they play in sort of making it really happen? Again, I mute myself early. Elise, why don't you take this one first, and then we'll give the final word to Julie.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think entirely. I mean, really, with the rare exception of your idea like takes off almost beyond your control and you're dragged along by it or something. I mean, I don't know that most people, most successful entrepreneurs, by the way, that's not what happens. And therefore, that's a tiny percentage of the. I mean, I don't know. Someone could come up with examples, I'm sure, but that is not the path. What happens is you get passionate about it, and you try it, and hopefully you learn and tack along the way appropriately. And when you're the entrepreneur and you're the founder, that idea is you. So if you give up, it's done, and you decide when it's done, and you decide when it's not done, and that's it. So the answer is basically, with a few exceptions, entirely, and that's really hard. That's really hard. That is one of the hardest, in my opinion, actually, I'll say that is the hardest thing about being an entrepreneur, is that you have to stab your baby eventually if you're going to shut it down, or you need to, tell everybody in the downturns, which there always are, that you're going to keep resuscitating, that baby is not dead. They just can't see it. And then you literally make that so, And when I was with her, she was like, I love this expression, you're rubbing two sticks together and you're creating something out of nothing. Well, if you don't believe to keep rubbing those two sticks together and creating it, then it's dead, right? And you have that power, and it cuts both ways. So when you go into down cycles, it sounds like this person who's been tweeting is an entrepreneur. You need to find people, surround yourself by people who believe in you and will support you through the hard times, because they are there. It's the darkest, just like the highest are the highs. And it would be tragic to give up on the idea prematurely. Now, this is being said from someone who has shut startups down. So I do personally believe, although people would probably disagree with me along the way, that you should do that. But I do think that there's a time where you keep resuscitating, and that is your job. Literally, that's your job. And everything else, everyone looks to you. So if you're asking that question, I would follow that path, because it needs to be ridiculously obvious that it's no longer the right thing for you to stop.
Julie, would you like to add to that?
Well, I developed the STAR program around the gap in care between the evidence-based need for rehabilitation and the delivery of those services. So because I am a cancer survivor and I experienced personally how devastating it is to not be offered the services to help heal and to be able to go back to work and so on, my passion is a huge part of what I do, and my work is very mission oriented. And I think that some people do come to entrepreneurship because they're innovative and creative, and they just have ideas, and they really are interested in getting them out there. And then I think other people come to it that are really mission oriented. And I work with a lot of doctors that are very, very mission oriented. They have something that they're incredibly passionate about, and they want to get it out there in various forms. One of the things that we talk about a lot at the course I direct at Harvard is productizing intellectual property. Like, how do you productize what you're doing? And, for me, passion is a huge part of that. Like, I just think that the mission is so important, and that it's wrapped up not only in my work, but also, it's legacy driven. It's sort of like what you're leaving behind in terms of the work that you did here, while you were here, and the mark that you left on this world, and so on. So my my work is very, I'm very passionate about it, and I've been told by business people sometimes, they'll sometimes look at me and say, wow, you really care about this, don't you? And I have to laugh. I'm like, yes, I really care about this. This really matters a lot. So I would say have passion and follow your heart, follow your mission.
A perfect way to end. So to everyone out there, again, thank you for joining us. This has been a lively discussion, a Twitter call again to everyone, and really it's been a really lively discussion. And again, I just want to end, have passion, follow your heart, and understand what you want, and you'll get there. And please share your stories with Medicine X. We love to hear stories of healthcare entrepreneurs. And please join us next week. And thank you again to Dr. Singer and Dr. Silver for this awesome discussion. Thank you again, and good night for now, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks so much for joining us tonight for this episode of Stanford Medicine X Live. We'll see you back here on May 27th, 2014 at 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, when we'll discuss the topic Medicine X, the Researcher Perspective. You won't want to miss the next episode of Stanford Medicine X Live. As a reminder, this program is made possible by support from the Stanford University School of Medicine, Department of Anesthesia, Stanford AIM Lab, Stanford Hospital and Clinics, and the Agency for Healthcare Research Quality. If you haven't yet done so, please take a moment to follow our YouTube page at www.youtube.com/Stanford Medicine X, so you can continue the conversation online and stay informed of program updates. From all of us here at Stanford Medicine X, we want to thank you for joining us today and remind you to join us again this Thursday, May 22nd at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for another edition of Stanford Medicine X Live, featuring a new healthcare design class from the Stanford University School of Medicine called Design for Health. This week, we are featuring David Ruthven from Patient Room 2020 on Designing for the Physical Environment with in-class moderator and e-patient Joe Rife. For all of you out there taking time to tune in with us tonight, thank you for joining us and being part of the conversation. Don't forget that registration for Medicine X 2014 is now open. Don't miss the year's premier patient-centered conference on emerging technology and medicine. Unique opportunities such as our masterclass program and our IDEO Design Challenge workshop have extremely limited space availability. You'll want to take advantage of these programs while our regular registration pricing is still available until August 1st, 2014. A special thanks to our guest panelists this evening. From all of us at Stanford Medicine X, we'll see you next time.